Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. The stage is set, you might say, for a heart connection with the land. One of the most favored things that I do is speak of the Indigenous all over the planet, because they all had something in common. They spoke in metaphors, in cycles, and in ways that perhaps today are a mystery. And yet they did the best they could to leave the wisdom so that it could be discovered someday. We find ourselves in a place called Ekpalam. And those who were here left a lot of messages. And the messages were about not just their cosmology, but about the basic truths of the universe. Truths that are celebrated and known from Indigenous all over the planet who never knew each other. And you have to wonder, how is this possible? The answer, dear ones, is this. There are things that are intuitive to you and to the Indigenous. And the things that are most intuitive come right out of the womb. Unless you're trained out of it, the first thing you do is you look at the sky. And you feel the earth and that which is around you. I want you to set yourself in a moment here, in a place and time that you didn't expect. What if I ask this? Could you, in your mind's eye, put yourself here 1,000 years ago? Could you put yourself with this community just for a moment? You see, where you sit is where they were. And if you did, what would you sense and what would you feel? Let's say you were invisible. Let's say you're sitting on the ground. Now let's talk about what they believe. If they wish to get in touch with their ancestors, they don't look to the sky, dear ones. They look to the earth. And you're sitting on it. Perhaps the very dirt or close to it that was there before, or close enough. And I'll tell you this, the wisdom of the planet contains all that ever existed, that was ever learned, that was ever taught by any Indigenous anywhere. I'm going to propose something that the Indigenous teach, that the earth is multidimensional, that the very dirt of the earth contains the actual knowledge and core truths of all the Indigenous everywhere. This would explain a little more, would it not? Why the Kryon in Peru would know the same things as the Navajo in North America, or the same kinds of truths that the Maya taught, or the Toltecs or the Aztecs taught. Do you know, they gave metaphors constantly. An underworld that you come from, that you graduate from. That is a metaphor for layers of consciousness that go from low to high. They understood that you go through a path of learning. Perhaps that ceremony is involved in that learning. Perhaps the dancing and the songs that you will learn and learn and learn, like a school that you would go to, even in the Western world, was a school of wisdom. All of it is in the dirt. Some have said, well, the indigenous, well, they did a lot of things. How quaint, you say. What if the indigenous of this planet, including the ones here, knew more than is known today? What if they did? And you might say, well, we have telescopes today. You have things that are modern today and look into the skies, but they don't have today what the indigenous had, the records of history. What did the stars do? What positions were they in back then? Now we know. And this tells us more about the planet's cycles than anything we have today. This planet is about to awaken with a big truth. And that big truth is called climate change. It's right on schedule, not caused by humans, and it will result in a different climate almost everywhere on this planet. Did you know that the indigenous understood that? They're one of the few humans who actually could track that. And today, in modern science, it's a mystery. It's even mislabeled. The indigenous knew it. They had seen it. Some of the indigenous in colder areas watched the glaciers come and go on a regular basis. And today, science sees them receding, and it's an emergency. It's a cycle, dear ones. The indigenous know all about the cycles. But the main one that is known by these people is the Pachacudi. And that is the one that says you are in a new cycle, a 26,000-year cycle, one that you were awakening to with promise and free choice. The indigenous had things you don't know about. It's called intelligence. My partner has taken me all over the world, where Western science has looked at the buildings and said they must have had help from beyond. What they had help is they knew how things worked. They could move stones very cleverly, using gravity, dirt, digging holes, fulcrum points, all of the things that today you don't even think of because you have machines. They built great things slowly. They had mathematics divisible by 4, and we have told you this before. If you will understand the universe, you will understand almost everything that is mathematical and computational is divisible by 4. We even told you, and we'll say it again, in your modern world, right now, if any of you were to take the chip out of your camera and look at the number, it will be divisible by 4. And the reason is this is where it naturally falls in mathematics, even in ones and zeros, even in the digital world. The natural evolution of mathematics will be numbers that are divisible by 4. Whether it's the compass or whether it's music, you'll find the 4s everywhere. And this ought to tell you something. Oh, great ones that do everything in 5s and 10s, the pyramids were built with base 4 math, and they had it here. These are the kinds of things that the modern world will discover someday, and it'll point right to here. My partner took me to Easter Island. The National Geographic had just been there, trying to figure out how the stones were moved. The Indigenous stood by as their guides and helpers. But the scientists never turned to the Indigenous and said, "Do you know how the stones were moved?" You see, they do. They're all related to the original Rapa Nui. And to this day, modern science says there are mysteries on Easter Island, and the Indigenous are just smiling. They know exactly how all the things were done. Naturally, beautifully, cleverly. You see, there's a bias. And the bias will say that the Indigenous were too old and too far away to know what you think they did. There is a revelation coming. And part of it will come right from here. You sit on the dirt of the earth that has all of the knowledge that ever happened in it. And I say to you again, tell me what mainstream religion today honors the dirt of the earth. And there aren't any. There's a revelation coming. And that will be the core truths of this planet, known by the Indigenous even here, in so many metaphors and so many cycles. And there'll come a day when there'll be a lot more honoring of those ancients who lived in places like this. And finally we say, did any of you meet yourselves here? Do you dare think of that as your hand is on your heart? Does the land talk to you? Does it say, welcome home? Does it say, welcome back? Think about these things, because old souls are here for a reason. These are the things we teach and will always teach, that the Indigenous of this earth had far greater wisdom than anything you're seeing today. And so it is.